These are great questions so far.
Hey guys, Rick Spencer. I hope Chamath gets to choose the wine this evening for dinner.
I did not get to choose your wine, so I apologize in advance.
What kind of wine am I drinking here? This is delicious.
This is a 2018 Chateau Conlefant Rousseau.
I love the bestie. Okay, question.
So you've talked recently in episodes about the speed of AI, the adoption, and how the winners are still unknown. That was reinforced in the sessions today. A room full of investors. How are you thinking differently about your investment, your strategic investment decisions and your strategy? Are there opportunities to look at venture investing differently, like venture studios, in the future of AI?
I had this conversation earlier today. I think I started a company in 2006 where we took large data sets and we built predictive models from those data sets. And we use those predictive models to make analytical tools available to a specific vertical, in our case, agriculture, farmers. And the models were both deterministic, meaning there was kind of definitions, algorithmic definitions of physical parameters, and there was like all the statistical inference that you get from large data sets. And it made recommendations for farmers. What a lot of people are calling AI today is fundamentally a predictive model on text, on language. I am making a language predictor that gives you a sentence. And it seems so profound because it is how we all interact with computers and interact with one another. And as a result, it is kind of viewed as this sea change across all of these industries instantaneously. It's this whole new era. But the fact is that, generally speaking, the digitization of things and the amount of data that's being generated on Earth is going up by some order of magnitude every number of months. And our ability to make predictions and build predictive models that are useful to specific vertical segments is improving every sequential cycle that this is happening across every vertical. And it has continued, and it hasn't changed, and it's not any different. So in this area of genomics and bioinformatics, there is an absolute sea change happening in human health, in synthetic biology, in our ability to understand and predict the biological world and make changes and create new drugs, create new systems for producing molecules, for producing things that humans consume. And it is all buoyed by machine learning applied to large data sets and genomics and other metadata associated with human health and biology. And we're seeing the same thing in other areas, whether it's chemistry, material science, industrial application, consumer markets, and so on. The era of what people are now calling AI is an interface layer of language that's really creating transformational opportunities on how these tools, how these systems, how these models can be utilized and provided to all these different verticals. And allows us to rethink business models, to rethink interaction models, and to really change the economics of different businesses and the utility and the productivity of humans, because it is about speech, it is about communication, it is about what we fundamentally do as a species. So I would argue that the general trajectory of machine learning, the general trajectory of data generation and our ability to make predictions, generate value across all these different markets is continuing in the way that it has been continuing for the last 20 years. And it is profound in its own right. And I wouldn't say that there's a massive sea change in that evolution because of large language models. Large language models create another set of opportunities. So I would kind of create a distinction and make sure that the categorization of the investment opportunities in large language models be assessed on its own. And everyone's all over the place, as you guys probably heard today. Foundational models are getting disrupted every other week. They're being decreased in size. Parameters are being reduced. They're being commoditized. You can run these things on M2 chips. Everything is up in the air right now, and it's friggin' nuts. You're going to invest in a company at a $500 million valuation, and 6 weeks later, it's going to be worth zero because someone open sourced the exact same thing that you can now do for 100K. So that's very difficult and very different but there are still like these incredible points of inflection happening across all these other industries with respect to machine learning. And that's where I spend my time.
Chamath, you want to add what you're looking at? I think this is going to be the big question, yeah.
6 or 7 years ago, there was this Google earnings release where they talked about building their own silicon. I've told this story before, but I pinged those guys and I was basically like, I just want to meet the team that built the TPU. Long story short, a year later, I put them in business. And, we've been building silicon for this moment for years. It's been really, really hard. And the reason it's been really, really hard is that NVIDIA is just really, really good. CUDA is very, very complete. And it's just very difficult to justify why one would build once you have something that you think is profound, through, implement multiple SDKs to like multiple points of silicon just doesn't make any sense. That being said, I still think you need to be at the absolute bottom of the stack and the absolute top of the stack. I think I'm a little too biased for saying the former, which is I'm hoping that there's vendor diversity and silicon diversity because I think it's going to be really important. I don't think we want to have a world where NVIDIA runs away with it. So I think there's investment opportunity there just because I think everybody should want that to happen. And then at the absolute top, Freeberg's right that all these foundational models, I think, are changing so rapidly that the thing that you want to figure out is like, what are you seeding it with to drive learning that's unique? And that's a data problem. So there's an example that I've given. This was an example given to me by Nikesh Arora. So I'm not going to take credit for it. He's the CEO of Palo Alto Networks, but he was telling me, when you look at travel, the travel space, all the public travel companies are like $300 billion of public market cap. Expedia, Travelocity, all these companies. But they're pure middlemen. And they sit on top of a data feed that comes from a handful of companies. One of them is Sabre. And so I went and I looked at Sabre. Sabre is like a $1.3 billion company, a small little company. But they are the ones that go into all the airlines, extract all this gobbledygook data, normalize it, and allow Expedia, Travelocity, Booking.com to exist. In a world of machine learning and AI where theoretically you can have conversational languages inside of WhatsApp or Messenger or Instagram, you see this beautiful picture, you're like, book me a ticket to that place. Well, Sabre is actually the key value creator there. And all these Expedia examples that are plugins to GPT make no sense. They make no economic sense. Those companies should go to zero. So I've used that as a forcing function for me to try to prove that there's really these two barbells. It's a barbell, bookends. One is a silicon and one of these sort of like data providers. That's probably an investable thing that's defensible. Everything in the middle, I think what Freeberg said is true, which is today it looks like it's worth a couple $2 billion, tomorrow it's worth nothing. And so I think you have to be very careful.
If you listen to, there's an interview that Stephen Wolfram did with Lex Friedman. If you guys listened to it a few weeks ago?
I had him on my pod a couple weeks ago, but haven't heard the free.
Wolfram?
Yeah, he's incredible. Yeah.
He's incredible. If you listen to that interview, I think Wolfram does a great job of describing the difference between inferential models or statistical models and computational models. Statistical models are where you take large data sets and you build statistical models that infer and predict things in the future or predict things that you ask it to predict from the data set that it's trained on. And then it creates a statistical representation. It has a probability of being right or wrong in every prediction it makes. And it creates a distribution of outputs from the model. And you can train a model from nothing today using a bunch of tools that are open source and generally available and a bunch of great silicon and all this amazing stuff that's now out in the world. But there's a bunch of things that you can't generate data and you can't necessarily train models on. And that requires computational models. Models where you actually have to build some system that creates a deterministic outcome. And deterministic means that it doesn't have a distribution of things that could happen. It has one thing. And it calculates it. Like 2 plus 4 is 6. There isn't a probability distribution on it being 6. 2 plus 4 is computable. It is calculable. It is 6. The great unlock that I think is ahead of us still, generally speaking, with respect to large language models, is the connection back to computational models, is the connection back to structured data, where you can make requests and integrate structured data into the output, combined with inferential output, and computational models, where you can take the inference, you can take the request, and figure out what computational models can I now run, in addition to making a prediction about an output. And that's where so much of the value is going to lie. And it's going to require incredible software engineering talent, applied math, statistics, all the stuff that's made data science, generally speaking, so successful over the last 2 decades is going to continue. And it's going to be this integration between computation and inference. And it's going to be applied in lots of different markets. And it's going to be really powerful. And we're all going to have our minds blown.